It works. That's a good start. Hi, guys. They
welcome.
talk.
Yes.
All right, so we're not super used to using microphones, so if he sounds like Darth Vader, or I sound like I'm all plosives, I do apologize. We're going to get through this, and it's going to be great. We are from World Anvil, and we're going to talk to you today about brave new world building. Oh, well, world building, basically. World building for RPGs. That's us. That's right now. We do have a sparkly assistant going around. She has some beautiful antlers, and she is currently getting your names and email addresses. The reason for this is that we are raffling off a membership, a year's membership for our website. So if you're into that, give us your name, and we will draw that at the end of the talk.
And by that we're talking about world building, I guess, right?
Yeah, do you want to click on?
I can try.
That's us. It works. It works. We have the technologies. So we are World Anvil. We are Janet and Dimitris. You get no prizes for guessing which one is which.
I'm not Janet.
We are both world builders. I've been role-playing since I was 10. Dimitri's been role-playing.
I've been world building since I was 5 years old, for role-playing games, and for myself to begin with, of course, not role-playing games at 5 years old.
So 10 months ago, we started on a new kind of adventure. We opened, I guess it's a website. It's for world building. So for world building RPGs, for world building novels, any kind of world building, pure world building as well. And it's a set of tools to organize your world building, put in your maps, drop pins in them, all that jazz. But we're not going to talk about World Anvil today. We want to talk about world building for RPGs. That's that. So there are some standard models of world building that lots of people have tried. There's top-down, there's bottom-up. So we're going to expand on those just a little bit to explain what they are, and then we're going to tell you why they might not be the best for role-playing games. So top-down world building. You start at the top. You start with a pantheon, you start with a world map, and then maybe you start to create continents, you start to fill those in. You start to create countries, you fill those in. You create races, you fill those in. Everything from the top to the bottom until you get to the PCs, eventually, maybe, right? But there are some reasons why this doesn't work very well. Because, and this is a bit of a public service announcement, top-down world building is the #1 cause of world builders' disease. Now, if you haven't heard of world builders' disease, go look at Tolkien, who spent his entire career, who spent his entire career building one world, right? It's a beautiful world, it's multifaceted, there are conlangs, it's great. But he barely managed to do anything with it because he got so stuck building the world, he never got to the next stage. It is incredibly time-consuming to build top-down, particularly if you flesh out everything, and it's also really daunting. Like, if you look at an entire world map and think, oh God, I have to populate this with races and villages and people and cultures and like 17 languages at least, right? Because our world has more than 17 languages. And then you go on and you go on and you go on, and then you think, I can't do it, I can't do it, I'll never be able to do it. And it's terrifying, right? So maybe that's not the best way. The other thing is that even after you've done all of this work, you still haven't got the tools to start your RPG campaign necessarily, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily give you everything you need. So let's talk about the other standard method, which is bottom-up. Go on, slide monkey. There we go. Bottom-up is the reverse. You start in a tavern, right? Everyone's started in a tavern before. You start in a tavern in a small village. You hear that there's trouble in the forest, so you go into the forest, and you spend a session in the forest. You then get some loot that you want to sell, so you go to the nearest town. And this is how you build the world. You build it session by session, bit by bit, from this small place to this large place, until eventually your characters are fighting the neighboring country or whatever. But this also has some problems. The reason is that it often remains very small focused. Often you end up with lots of disparate things that don't go very well together, and you have no scope, you have no big picture. And that means it can be incredibly hard to do things like foreshadowing. You can't foreshadow this massive important city, so your NPCs that should know about it 5 sessions ago don't know about it until your players rock up to it. That makes your world feel very much like, if you'll excuse the phrase, an ass pull. Like, you just pull it out your ass when you need it, and nothing has been seeded in advance. And that's really a shame, because, you know, you're creating these beautiful things, but they feel like blocks just stacked on top of each other that have no integration. They don't feel like a single unit. And that's kind of a waste of all of your amazing ideas, right? Like, what a shame, because your players really want to engage with your world, and that can really break immersion. Having said that, it doesn't work too badly for common media. Like, if you're writing a book, if you're writing a film, you control the way the audience interacts, right? So in Skyrim, in Witcher, in Harry Potter, the user's journey is controlled. You define what they see. And that means you don't struggle. I mean, even in computer games, you define how people interact with your world. You can't go up to a character in Skyrim and say, hey, do you know where that dragon came from? There's no box for that. You can't say, hey, I heard you had a pet duck. Tell me more about that. There's no box for that, right? So you can't interact with people. And also, your characters are limited in their exploration. I don't know if there are any Skyrim fans here. I am a massive die-hard Skyrim fan. If you walk down the road south of Riften, you get to a gate. And then you try and walk through the gate, and it says, you can't go that way. All right, but I wanna. I wanna go that way. I wanna see what's there, but you can't. You can't, right? And everybody knows that PCs in tabletop RPG games will try and walk off the end of the map. That's what we do, right? I know, I'm a PC. I want to go see what's there. And you just can't do that in a computer game. You can just hem them in with mountains, you can say you can't go that way, fine. But you can't anticipate your players' every move. And you can't build an entire world in excruciating detail, right? It's exhaustive, it's daunting, it's impossible. So what do you do?
Well, that's a good question. We have the opportunity, by building the community of World Anvil, to talk to about 90,000 people, not personally. I mean, 90,000 people would have been taken several years to talk to. But we talk to people all the time, and we discuss how they build their worlds, because that's what they come here to do. And the question is always, where do I start? And it was very hard for us to find essentially a solution for that. And after talking with several people, we started to collate our notes, not our noses, and and start discussing effectively which is going to be the best way for us to create a good way for people to be able to start, to get on board. Because the truth of the matter is about 90% of the people who use World Anvil are actually storytellers that play for the Game Masters. They're playing Dungeons & Dragons games, or they took something like Call of Cthulhu and they're building their own world, or they're playing Shadowrun or Pathfinder or Starfinder nowadays. But all of those games, and especially D&D 5th edition, is kind of geared towards the idea of like, okay, we used to give you campaign settings, but now we don't do that anymore. We just give you either adventures to play and build on, or you take your own world and you build it up. And that means that many people come to World Anvil to effectively build their own worlds. So, Agile world building is a methodology that I'm going to go through it with you today, and I'm going to talk about how and what we can do in order to make our worlds feel alive and have a much greater scope without having to do like a lifetime of work before that. You don't need to be Tolkien, as Janet said. We can be smarter than that. The system behind Agile world building is heavily inspired by, actually, do we have any developers here, by any chance? Web developers, application developers? Hello, Hans. So, it's heavily inspired by the idea of agile methodology. It's the idea that you have to build what you need to build, and you have to understand what the scope of what you're going to be doing is, but you don't have to build it to begin with. And that is the trick. Because the thing is that agile world building and world building in general is, in fact, an alive art. You're not asked to have a whole world created to start your campaign. Your players will never be able to interact with the whole world session one. Like, you cannot say, hello, that's my world, here you are, read the 500 pages library. That's not how it works. Actually, I would say that you do not want it to work like that. Because if a player knows about your world, then you're kind of missing the point of exploring and learning about the world itself, right? I found it always very hard to talk to people that have read, for example, when we were playing Forgotten Realms some years ago, I would have players that would say, no, but in the rules say, for example, that this character is 12th level and you played it like a 6th level. And yeah, but that's my world. It's not your world to decide what's going to happen, and you shouldn't be knowing about these things. This lore is not actually considered to be for players. It's supposed to be for the storyteller to weave the story for you, kind of thing. So, having said that, we have separated this methodology in 3 major parts. The first one is going to be the foundation, the second one is the scene, and the third one is the plot. Each of them has 4 subparts, and they're very simple and very easy to describe, and I will go through examples for each of them. Let's go start. Did I do that? I don't know. Sorry, guys. Let's start with the foundation. So before we actually go into talking about the foundation, I'll talk about what agile world building is all about. It is a cycle. And the idea is that when we are playing role-playing games, we are in fact in a cycle. You will start your session, you will think about what you want to do with your players, you'll probably write your adventure, you're going to play your game, and then in some way or another, some people do, some people don't, we'll have a wrap-up of the session. And then we'll go again next week or next second week or whatever else, how you do it. We are using the same system, we're just putting it to work for us by creating some sort of a structure that will allow you to make this process easier for you to get going, playing your game, without having to spend several weeks or months building up your world. So, the foundation. 4 steps: scope, theme, meta, and drama. Each of them will give you effectively the answers that you need in order to build what you want to build for your world without building the whole of the world. The way that this is supposed to be used is very simple. For every single question that will be asked during this session, you just have to write the smallest amount possible. The whole idea is that by the time that you finish with building the 3 parts of the agile process beginning, you will have possibly a paragraph for each of them, so not more than a page and a half to essentially get you started with session 1. First of all, scope. So, why are you building this world? And that's actually a very important question that people don't understand. Why is it important? Many people start because they had a good idea and say, for example, I want to build a world because I like spaceships. Cool, that's fine. I mean, I like spaceships as well, and I like, for example, Dune and everything like that. But that doesn't mean that you are committed to it. Because we are flimsy people. We like one thing one day, and then the next week we kind of like saw the next movie, we saw the next season of Game of Thrones, and then now, you know what, I don't want spaceships anymore, I just want to do like dragons, yeah, or something like that. Putting down just a sentence saying, you know what, I want to build this and I'm committed to this because I want to do X, Y, Z. This can be, for example, I want to write a book. So I want to start my campaign and keep notes from my book. Or it can be because I want to make my players suffer. I often do that. And it's beautiful. Like you see them trying to think and figure out the next problem, or being psychologically traumatized, and it brings me happiness. Not so much.
I should mention I'm one of those players, huh?
Yes. And it is a very, very good reason, because then at least you know what you're trying to achieve. You know that every time you play a session, you have to find a way to make Janet cry by the end of it. And that's fine, as long as you are so sadistic and that's what you want to do. The next question is, what are you getting out of it? Sheer pleasure, or the ability, for example, to write a book. So if you know, for example, that you're writing a book based on that, that puts a premise on what you're doing. It means that you want possibly your players to be more engaging, or you're asking them to do more specific things when it comes to the role-playing. So it's not going to be a hack and slash campaign, because if you're writing a book that is actually 30 ways of slaying an orc, yeah, maybe it's a subject by itself, but if you want to write an adventure and an epic and talk about characterization and talk about essentially a relationship between the people, maybe a hack and slash campaign is not really the way to go for that, right? So you do want to change the way you talk, change the encounters, the challenges that the players will actually be going through. And thirdly, actually, what is unique and fascinating about this world? This is more about hyping yourself than anybody else, because the players will be discovering in the future. But for you, it might be like, I really want to make my players by the end of it to be gods. Or I want my players by the end of it to have the ability, for example, to have a spaceship and fly across the stars and discover new worlds. And what is unique about mine is that like every single planet will pose to them a completely different challenge. That's like a way of actually doing it. Secondly, the theme. So many stories and many plots can be played in completely different places. Like you can have exactly the same plot being played in a fantasy setting, in a science fiction setting, or a science fantasy setting. The theme is more or less how you dress it. As simple as that. It gives you the detail that you need to make the world unique and make the world look and feel the way you want it. So think about that. Let's say you're going to play a murder mystery. A murder mystery can be played in a fantasy world. It can be played definitely in a Call of Cthulhu world, but can also be played in a science fiction world. What is the difference? Well, one is amongst the stars, the other is in a beautiful forest or in a medieval city, and the other can be in 1890, for example, New York. There are specific key elements, apart from saying to your players, you are at New York 1990 kind of thing, that will make it alive. And that is actually what the theme is about and the genre is about. You can use specific tricks to make your players feel like that. So for example, let's talk about that. Which are the key elements that will make somebody feel that they're in a fantasy world? It can be, for example, the bar that they're in, the fact there is an inn to be itself. It could be that when you go and walk into a forest, if that's an epic fantasy, you might hear, for example, the birds chirping and possibly the weird snake creature weaving its way across the trees further ahead. It can be the fact that you know more or less that you will be seeing an elf ranger at some point coming to you and say, what are you doing here, and why you just burned this kind of bush, I needed it for my wizardry or whatever. But when you're in a science fiction setting, it is exactly the same scene, but think about the idea that you're in a spaceship. You hear the humming of the engines. You have things like the fact that you're disengaging the warp drive and suddenly the stars come into focus. These are things that you can use again and again in music and in video and in motifs, essentially, in your storytelling to reinforce this. Saying that something is science fiction doesn't mean it makes it science fiction. You have to find ways within your sessions to reinforce that, to make them believe that you're in there. Suspension of disbelief is probably one of the most important things we are doing as storytellers. We're trying to make them for 3 hours, 4 hours a week to go away from the troubles of everyday life and be in a starship. And the themes is how you can actually do it. Thirdly, meta. So meta is actually a bit of, maybe the hardest part of this talk, but effectively you cannot build the whole world. And if I can tell you right now and ask you, how do you define the earth as we live in? How do you build a world like that? What would that world be? Where do you start? Do you start by talking about the economic relationship between countries? Do you talk about the fact that we are in the middle of a new era of gender equality? Do you talk about the fact that we are in a place that is full of war coming out anywhere? Or that the agriculture is experiencing essentially a huge boom? There are so many things to discuss about, and the thing is that you don't have to talk about all of them. Your players won't care about agriculture if they want to go and hack and slash creatures, unless if the creatures are actually grown in a garden. There's no way you can actually make them interested about that. So think before you start your campaign and write a paragraph about, I want my world to focus in combat, in warfare, or I want my world to be all about essentially the religious troubles of this world. So writing this down means that every time you go to and write, for example, about a city, you won't talk about the agricultural output of the city. You will write about his involvement in war, or its involvement in ideas like how the nobles of the land interact with each other, or kind of like games are playing with each other effectively to take over the world. And you can add more of those. This is just an example effectively for you to give an idea, but think about that and think about what the players will need from you to know more when you're writing an article. This is essentially like a guide of what kind of sections your sentences should have, as simple as that. And finally, the drama. A world is a beautiful place, and it's just that if nothing happens. And a drama, it doesn't need to be that you're being hunted down by dogs. Drama is also the stories and the overarching plots that make this world alive. It can be the fact that Asmodeus is trying to come, for example, from the Hell Dimension and take over the world. It can be the fact that there were 4 years of drought and suddenly everybody's famished. Famine is very well known from medieval times to cause the worst in men. It can bring illness, disease, war. Everything comes from famine. It's no luck that there are one of the fourth horsemen of apocalypse is famine, for example, because, you know, it kind of causes everything else. So this is what will be the focus of your world when it comes to what is happening around them. I mean, if I go to somebody in the UK and I say, how do you feel today? What actually bothers you? Probably will tell you it's the weather, because we have horrible weather in England. By the way, we're from England. Hello, Finland. And this is what people will engage in your world. It can be economic disparity, it can be anything you can think of, but this is...
Brexit.
Yes. Don't remind me of that. Yeah. But this will give you, again, a way for you to be able to push your agenda forward. It's the way that you make your characters feel what the world is about. Next part. The scene. So we established how the thing, what the world is about, what are you trying to achieve out of that, and how you're going to be transferring that as an idea to your players. The next part is about where do we play? If we were in a Shakespearean act, is it Fair Verona? Is it an island in the middle of the ocean? Or in something else? The first one is the rules. So we are kind of used to say, you know what, this is a real life place, like Earth, or it is a fantasy place that has dragons. But there is so much more about the rules in the world. We can talk about effectively the fact that gravity is different. Like it might be lighter gravity. Suddenly people jump much further than normal if they are not from this world. If they're not from this world, because if they're of the same world, they will have same bone structure. This is a different issue altogether. But it can be, for example, that in your world, you live in a ring world. The whole world is a ring, and you live in the side of it. So what you look up in the sky, you're actually looking at your neighbor that is also like, you know, having sex with his wife kind of thing somewhere on the other side of the ring world. Possibly, if you have a telescope. I mean, that would be interesting. These things will change the way that your world reacts to what is happening. Like, think about, let's take the ring world example again. Think about how different adventures in this world would be. Because you might not be able to go where you want to go, but you might be able to see where you're going to go. Like, literally, you might have to traverse the greatest distance, which is actually exactly the opposite side of the ring, but you can see it. If a battle's happening there, if you have a telescope, you can actually see what's happening. That changes fundamentally the way that people will interact with this world. What if your world is a dish that is on top of 4 elephants, which is on top of a tortoise, running through the universe? That also changes things. First of all, for those that you don't know, in that world, magic has a color. So automatically you have a completely different way of understanding magic in your world. It might be that in your world, you actually have flying islands. The whole world is flying islands. How did that happen? What does it change in terms of transportation? What does it change in terms of survival? Geography and the special properties of the world. So this is where people get really bogged down and start actually doing top to bottom. You do not have to write the whole world. You don't even have to talk about the whole world to your players. But the chances are that if you are explorers, or if they want to have a feeling of the world, they will know that there are 3 continents, or there are 5 continents, and 3 of them you know because they're essentially south from here and west from here. The 5th one, they might not even know that it's there, or they might know that it was just discovered, and the 5th one and the 4th one actually just disappeared hundreds of years ago. You don't have to build the whole map. You can just make a scribble. It doesn't have to even be the real map. It will give context to your players to understand more or less their place in the world physically, because we are kind of visual people as humans. We interact much better when it comes to something we see. It's a different thing to say to somebody, yeah, you were in the south of that continent, and a different thing to say to them, here you are, that's where you are, more or less. More or less. As again, you're the storyteller. You don't have to tell them the truth. You have to tell them what the truth is for them. And that's actually a very important thing that many people do wrong. And I think that giving too much detail is as much a ruin for the suspension of disbelief as giving too less. Special properties and features of the world, we discussed it before as well. It can be the idea that the islands of the world are all flying, so you're in a floating island. How do you travel? This is a prime example of geography changing the way that you actually interact with the world. The scene and the living, yeah, that's actually one of the most important things. We covered the things that are in your world, but we haven't covered the people who are in your world. A small introduction saying, okay, these are the humans, the elves, the dwarves, the gnomes, or whatever else you have in your world, gives you an idea of who are in the world, but also in many ways get your world very naked because it defines exactly what the world is about. Maybe your players have never seen a dwarf or an elf because they live in the heartlands of the human lands. So in many ways, when you start a campaign, you don't need to write about everything. You might give them the idea of myths and legends, and you might have to think for yourselves how you will actually go navigate this minefield of like races and species and different ethnicities, but you don't have to write all of them. You just have to write the ones that your players will know about and the ones that you need to know about in order to write the story that you want to tell. That doesn't mean you will never do them. It means that you don't have to start them with them being there. History and events. I think we're almost there. So, history and events actually is a very interesting one because it is one of those that the truth can really go away from what the players will know. For two ways. First of all, your history and events will be warped based on who won the battle or who wrote the history. As simple as that. So the history that you write for yourself is not the history you're going to say to your characters about and your players about. Or even if you do, you might say that there was a battle 1,000 years ago and the good guys won and you are the good guys, which is great. But what they don't know is that you were not the good guys. In fact, you slayed completely the elves in this place and now there are no elves to tell the story. We've done it in the US.
It's also worth mentioning that you don't need to use specific dates, and certainly not for your players. Unless your society is very date-oriented, don't worry about dates. Just put them in a line. Cause and effect. That's all you need. Don't get bogged down with making a detailed history of everything. It's not necessary.
And as Janet said, the important thing about doing this exercise is, in fact, about cause and effect. Because knowing what happened to your world will dictate what possibly is going to happen in the future, which means that you will also have the ability to forecast and, in many ways, also talk about stories in a more show-don't-tell kind of way. If in your history in your world you had a civilization that once lived and was destroyed after a plague, the chances are that if you see living ruins, they would be from that civilization. If you suddenly do a hospital and say, yeah, that's a new civilization that I just discovered kind of thing, and that's not the ruins you discover, it's not going to actually fit in with the history you're going to say. It will go away from the themes that you create in the very beginning of the process. So creating these historical events will help you later on to go back and say, okay, I will do that. Is there a question?
Yes, a question. For me, it does make sense to not think of dates too much when dealing with fantasy-oriented, fantasy-themed world. But what if you're dealing with something like sci-fi or science fantasy, Star Trek versus Star Wars? If you have a society who's capable of traversing the stars, how do you justify the fact that they don't know, for example, when exactly happened the great
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah.
that caused them to leave for the stars?
Well, sometimes it might not be the case of knowing. I mean, there are many examples in science fiction that the races that left because of a huge disaster completely lost track of time. Because, as you're absolutely right, when it comes to relativity, you might lose completely the sense of time. You might not even know where you are at this point, the point in time. And of course, if you are in a science fiction society which is so far evolved to be able to calculate and estimate time based on what relativity does to it when you're traveling over faster than light speeds or anything like that, probably you do have already a system to arrange that. So for you, as a storyteller, you write linearly. For you, time is a series of events, but that doesn't mean it will be the same thing for your players or for people who know about your world.
The other thing is, if you're comfortable in dealing in dates, deal in dates. Go for it. If you're not comfortable, if it's bogging you down, move on. come back to it later. You don't need to worry about it until it's important. That's what I would say. Just make sure that the cause and effect is there. And if you're comfortable with dates, do it. Absolutely. If it's important for your genre, that goes back to the scope. If dates is important and you're doing a campaign about where we are now and how history got us there and the problems we're facing, maybe dates are more important. And you can check that with your scope.
And a long, long time ago can be as good as 1,503 years and 2 months ago. Because it doesn't really matter. It was a long time ago.
As fits your scope, basically.
Final part, the plot. So this is kind of an interesting one. I will jump through this slide very quickly. This is how you create engagement to your world and makes you understand where do you need to go. Something that Guy said yesterday, which was very important, is that we are storytellers. We're not writing the story, we're writing the plot. Chances are, shit will go wrong because there are players. And 95% of the cases, they will not follow the plot. They will find their own plot, and that is fine. The problem is that, what if you sat down for 3 weeks and you wrote this beautiful story and the players say, you know what? I'll go the other way. And suddenly you lost all the time you put into it. I mean, there are ways to railroad your people, of course. Yeah, I mean, I won't go into that. That's a storytelling thing. There are ways to railroad. I'm not pro-railroading. I'm more like, let the players go through the boundaries, do whatever they want. But you have to understand that this is all you need to write to start your campaign. You need to know that you have a major plot that probably they will never touch because it's too big for them to touch. It will probably take thousands of years for this to unfold, and there is only a small percentage and portion that you'll ever be able to interact with. Then you have the Archmage and his troll tasked to collect one of the 5 required artifacts to open a gate to hell. Probably that would be 15th to 20th level thing, because he's a freaking Archmage and he probably has a whole army behind him. There is no way the players will be able to go there, and if they do, they will probably die in TPK next campaign. Simple stuff. But what you need is down there. The apprentice mercenaries terrorize the local village, steal young children and for sacrifices. This will link up to there. This will be the very start that you need to know. With only those 11 sentences, because I think there are 11 or like 10 sentences in there, you have an understanding of a whole plot line and how it's going to unfold. The chances that you're going to be writing your first adventure there, in the very bottom, and giving some possibly idea of how you'd move from there to up there. And that's all you need to do. Because then, if your players say, let's go to the left side, you say, okay then, let's see how that gets us. You are a player as well, and you should be having fun. If you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong, just to be clear. And of course, you don't have to just build one plot. It's a world, it's a dynamic thing, and it will change, and you can have some ideas, just draw them in the thing, and just put them essentially on secondary and tertiary and deeper ideas, just all together, just for you to create a picture of how this campaign can be. You see down there, that's where most people start, rats on a basement. Do you know why? Anybody? You don't know why you start with rats on a basement? Okay, so you rather start on a basement because it's something that will not kill your players and will give them the opportunity to have a discussion on the tavern afterwards. It's as simple as that, because they will have to face a challenge, and challenge is what makes people come together, and it will makes people effectively start to forming a discussion, start to form maybe if you're playing actually hack and slash, it may be simply them defining who is at the front eating all the damage and who's behind throwing the arrows. But it's still interaction, and it still defines the party as something, as a working unit. The rats in the dungeon or the basement is a simple way of actually starting. It doesn't have to be rats in the dungeon. It can be any low-level, simple adventure that the point is to get some story, get some mood, get some theme out of there, have them to interact with the world, get them to start it. And of course, if there are new players, it's an easy way not to kill them and make them feel comfortable about the game. Because if you have new players in your party, the chances are if you start with a complicated plot, they will just be like, and that's where you'll have them for the next 5 sessions. 10 minutes? For what? Ah, really? Yes. Jesus Christ! Quickly! Starting the campaign! Dear God, Janet, you take it from here.
Okay, let's see how quickly we can do this. We are going to talk about starting the campaign. So, when you get your campaign started, you've defined your scope, you've defined your setting, you know who the races are that your players can choose, right? You've done all of that, and now it's time to get your players involved. This is where the variables come in, right? So, we're going to start with a paragraph. And this is sort of half hook and half explanation. You want to give them a taste of the world, but you don't want to give them everything. You just want to hook them in. You want to tell them why it's cool. You want to give them a little bit of a taste. Once you've done that, and you've introduced your world, yes, I will play, yes, I would like to be a PC in your world, yes, okay, good, on we go. You've decided who's in the party, you're ready, you start by producing for them something like this. Now, this is two examples, the one from Flightless, the other from Ethnis. These are two worlds that are on World Anvil. And you can see that in Flightless particularly, that's the example on the right, they've defined some of the things that are different to our world, some of the physical rules of the world. So, for example, in Flightless, birds don't fly. That's one of the rules. Okay, so just so your players know what's what. They know how gravity works. They know the important things. They know if there's magic. And then you can give them a little bit about the kind of things that they can expect, the kind of genre they can expect. And again, you can refer back to your scope. You can refer back to all of that stuff we did at the beginning and just take a taste, take the stuff the players need to know, put that in this document, and then they can start spawning their character ideas. Give them a little bit of history, just enough for what they would know as boots on the ground people. They don't need to know everything. And again, that will change depending on the kind of campaign you're running. That will change depending on the kind of character they want to make, and the kind of party they are. If they're a party of archmages, they might know more about magic, right? If they're a party of farmers, they'll know less. So you can tailor that to the players, and you can tailor that to the game. Again, refer back to all the stuff you did at the beginning. That's why we did that work, so that it can inform all the work we do next. And you give them a little bit about the current location. Basically, this is where they start, where you want to start the campaign. Somehow, the players have all arrived here. So you give them a little bit of a map, maybe some important NPCs that they would know if they've been in this place for any period of time. But we're talking like, this guy is the mayor, this guy is the blacksmith, this guy is the tavern owner. You don't need to know the name of the dog, you just need to know the name of the tavern owner. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not super detailed, it's enough that they can start to get a picture of the place that they're beginning in. This is yours.
It is mine. I will try to do it quicker. Sorry. So this is what we discussed effectively before very quickly. You know the plot. They weave the story. They don't know the plot, and they should not be knowing the plot. What they should know is what is the hook. Why are they doing what they're doing, and where are they going from here? So at this point, you are telling them about, example, Archmage sacrifices children. They might not know about that at all, but what they will know is that in the village 1 valley away, 2 children disappeared in a period of 3 weeks because a trader just came and told them. That's all they need to know, and that is their hook. From all the things that you created and all the beginning, that is what they are starting to know before they start the game. And within the game, then, of course, that is your job to storytell and say, for example, yesterday night, you heard a scream, you went to the place, and you found out 3 shadow men running away, jumping the cliffs, for example, jumping behind the...
Right, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. Sorry. Next. Make use of the material you created, with their background, to find it together. That is something that we've added lately, and it's actually the idea of player interviews. Something that we don't do very often is... Actually, something we do very often is create characters with our players, or tell them to do them by ourselves. But that means that the characters that you just built have nothing to do with the world, or at least they have something to do with the world, but this is not what you think of the world, it's what the players think that the world is. Sitting down with your players, even if they created their characters afterwards, and doing an interview can be very, very powerful for you. I'll give you an example. Can I have a volunteer? Hello.
Right at the back.
Right at the back.
Up you come! Quick, quick! Yes, yes! Run, run! +2 Constitution! Well done! Here you are, take this.
All right.
Choose a race. Any race.
Kenku.
Choose a class.
Rogue.
Rock. Where were you born?
When I was born?
Were you the character
The slums.
in the slums of a big city?
Yeah.
Big city. And tell me about the city. I mean, tell me, quick question actually. The slums, are they filled with Kenku or are there other races there?
It's mostly human. I was raised by a human when I was
So
young.
Kenku is actually not really...
No, it's not a common.
Good. So in the slums then, let's talk about what else... tell me one of the most important buildings in the slums and why was it important to you?
Probably the entrance to the Thieves Guild.
Excellent. So, and he was raised by a human, exactly. So you know two things already. You need to build the city, or need to write a paragraph about this city. You need to write about the Thieves Guild because it's important for his character, and you know that he was raised by a human. So, out of nowhere, you have two more paragraphs to add that will make his life much better because he will know details. I can tell him, for example, the human who raised him was called George, and he's a blacksmith. And suddenly he has a relationship, which I can kill later on and make him desperate and horrible.
There you go. Exactly.
I know that when he goes back to the city of the slums, people will know him. He will know the entrance to the Thieves Guild, but the thieves will know him. And if he, for example, we could talk to his background and will say that he fled the city because he stole something from the Thieves Guild, then I know what I can do with him. I have a whole plot line that will feel personal to the character. I can torment him and make him unhappy while making me happy, which is great. So, an interview that takes 2 seconds, give me more world building to do, which took me what, like 30 minutes maybe to write it down all of it? And suddenly the world is more alive for him. Because he will know what he wants to do and he will have something to refer to back. Because if the players have to go to that city, and I can very much instrument it to go to that city, he will know information about it. I won't have to go back to the site and say, oh, by the way, you know that and you know the other. No, he can play with it because he knows it already. I have given him a paragraph already. That's all he needs to know, right?
And again, this goes back to the agile design.
Yeah, that we've already done essentially, yeah. And that's where we're going there. So you talk to him because you just played with him. So you learn from him. You think about what you want to do about the city, and you write it down. One more paragraph. More world building, but that's before the game, and you already have something that's very specific. You don't write randomly about a city in your world out of the 1,000 cities that maybe you have. You write about the city that you need to care about, and he cares about. Thank you very much, by the way. All the world is a stage. You want to take it from here?
Sure. So this is Shakespeare, obviously. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. Well, the point of this is that the DM is the stage. The DM is the plot. The DM is not the player. So the players create the story by their interaction with the stage, by their interaction with the world, and by their interaction with each other. So that's just a really important thing to remember as a DM. You don't have to create the story. You only have to create the plot.
Your adventures are the plot, effectively, and are the place they're going to visit, not what's going to happen. And that will save you a lot of time. You don't have to write what's going to happen, just what it is, where it is, and why is it happening.
Exactly. If you want to write what's going to happen, write a novel. It'll be awesome. But as the DM, we don't do that. That's cool. It's a different job. We create a story all together.
Session 0. Who of you ran session 0s? Cool. One person? 2?
2, 3, 4,
4,
5, 6. Yay!
Okay. Good amount. So, as with the personal interview with the players, session 0 is the way for you to connect your party, if you want to do that. But imagine about that. If one person can give you 3 points of world building, how many the interaction between them can bring you? Because that's the thing. Rising complexion comes from many people and many points coming together to work together. So if you just talk to them and you say, okay guys, we talked about the high side of the world, what's happening. Now let's talk about the local location that you are. Let's talk about essentially what you really each other know about this world and how can we bring you together. Don't make it something that has to happen off the game. Make it something that will happen in the game. Session 0 is a beautiful way for you to introduce your players to the world, talk to them a bit more about the world, and also bring them together in a way that the first session they come in and they know each other. And they don't, like, we know each other from all time, or we went to university together. It's like, he's my niece, she's my niece. And this guy, I met him when I was essentially in the slums, and he was trying to sell me rotten meat for meat kind of thing. So suddenly you know who they are and why they know each other. You start the dynamic of relationship between your players from the get-go, and they feel comfortable. They are part of the world because they have all the points that link to that world. Again, as we said before, you play the session with your players, You learn about from it, you dream, you think about what you want it to be and how you want to grow essentially the idea of what they just told you. You build on it and you go to session 1, ready-made and full of world-building ideas.
And the party knows each other also.
Finally, running the game.
Oh yeah.
Ta-da!
We better be pretty quick with this. So, we've told you about world building today. We're not going to tell you about how to be a GM. That's your business, and that's his business.
His business.
Guy is our ally. He's amazing. If you want more information on pure DMing, go listen to Guy's channel. That's not what we've told you today. We've told you about world building specifically and how to manage your world building. Speaking of which, hey, it's Banana Batch Cucumber. I love this guy. So this is a very cheeky trick that I can explain very quickly, which is stolen from writing. It's called slicing time. So if you've ever read a book, the characters finish something, and then 10 years later, this guy's walking down the street. That's slicing time. You don't need to explain everything they did in those 10 years. You don't need to explain everything they ate in those 10 years. But as DMs, we can use this the other way around. So if your players decide that they want to run off in the one direction to terra incognita, like the bit that you've not built yet, right? There are some things that you can do about that. So you can slow them down by slicing time. You can make them do things. You can make them go through things by slicing time. I cannot access my notes. There we go. So you can do things like make them find transport. You can do things like throw in encounters. You can do things like slice time in the narrative. So, for example, they have an encounter, it gets to the evening, and then you paint the scene for them. So now you're all sitting down by the campfire. What do you do?
And if you have the basis, as we discussed before, about the relationship between those characters, it's going to be much easier. Because then you can give them topics that will feel like they're actually building their characters and they're growing into what they're doing. And this is a trick that it might sound like it's cheeky and you're trying to stop people from playing, but in fact you're not changing what they're playing, they're changing the pace of the game. Yeah. It is as simple as that. And
the other thing is that all of that stuff that you do is building complexity within the linear story. It's building adversity, which makes them feel like they're overcoming things. It's giving them some XP sometimes, which is kind of nice for them. And it also builds the character interaction around the table. So they don't turn into murder hobos. They're not just looking for the next thing to kill. They actually have to talk to each other, which is really nice as an immersion experience and really nice as a party building experience. Because everybody's had that party where one guy is like, I hate everyone, I'm going to steal the loot and run away. Meh. By doing things like this, you can prevent that because you're building social bonds between the characters, and they're less likely to nick the loot, basically, and run away and do these kinds of things.
But even if they do, we can talk actually about a very simple trick you can do to always have something in your sleeve.
This is just a toolkit, basically.
Yeah, that's a very simple toolkit. Essentially, how many of you have ever run to the player that goes there and say, what's the name of this guy there?
Yeah.
Yes.
How many of you smacked him? Fewer than me. Okay, good. Yeah.
You always end up having that. And the problem is that sometimes you'll end up with calling people Bob all the time. I do. Janet knows that very well.
Yeah, lots of Bobs.
But the trick is that if you have literally a very small list of names that are specifically designed to work in your world. So if you are in Greece, or like an ancient Greece place, call somebody Hargard the Great, sounds like completely out of context. But if you know that this is kind of Greece, and he's called, for example, Alexander, or Philip, or whatever, it's in context. So having a piece of paper that tells you 10 names about the location that you are close by, and you can use them very quickly and easily, will make them feel at home. First of all, they will be very surprised because then you know the name of the maiden, just like put the laundry out, which is freaking amazing. Because I say, yeah, her name is Linda. It's like, you know, she's like here for 3 years now, and she's actually just do the laundry every day at 10 o'clock in the morning. Suddenly you have context and you don't feel that you are essentially being stressed, because this can be stressful, especially if the players want to really wind you up. Second thing, location names. What is the closest town? Where is the tavern? What is the name of the tavern? What is the name of the blacksmith? What are these mountains up there? A small list can make your life much easier. And, you know, a bit of creativity. You can call it, for example, if it was Greece, Pella, and you can say it's Pella Mountains, or there are the Pella Plains, or the Pella Sea, or whatever, find a name, use it whatever you want, but that's the trick. You're actually using something that's in context, it's supposed to be in there. Secondly, finally, we have not so random encounters and adventure hooks. It is very common for people when you want to slice time, as Janet said, to say, okay, let's roll D3 direwolves. D3 direwolves don't say much. But what if it was not D3 direwolves, but it was in fact a cart on the road with 3 dead bodies filled with grapes? You go there, you try to check out
the grapes, not the bodies.
Well, yeah, fair enough. Suddenly you have a scene. It's still the D3 direwolves. But the trick is, you have a theme, because it's relevant to your world, because you know, for example, that in the city that they're going to be approaching, or a city around here somewhere, they have vineyards, so they're producing grapes. So you are kind of in a theme kind of thing there. And they approach the cart, and they found out that a wolf comes from the cliff on the top. So you have a location, you have a bit of like a small map just to give them an idea. And the moment you approach there, 4 other wolves come from within the forest. And suddenly you have an encounter that will take them about an hour and a half, possibly, to resolve, even with the loot and everything like that, and the repercussions. And suddenly it's an alive game. You slice time, but you did it in such an elegant way. Nobody actually even knew that it was actually slicing time. For all they care, it was part of your goal altogether.
And you can drag and drop these encounters when you need them. It's pretty easy. So as long as you've prepped the basics, you can just be like, this has happened.
And by the end of the session, if you used one, just add to the list, and that's pretty much it. You erase it from the list.
Strike through the ones you've used, refresh them for next time. You're done.
That's pretty much it. Finally, who of you do post-op after the session?
Nice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're breeding.
Great, actually, that's really good. So post-op is something that is a very nice exercise for you to learn what your players think, what do they like, what do they hate about the game, what they would like to know more. And that means for you, this is an opportunity for you to do once more very focused world building. You won't build things that they don't care about, and you will know what they care about. If they tell you, I'm really fascinated about this idea that you had kind of there, and I'm really curious about this thing, you should build about that probably, or just add a bit more detail. By the way, when I say build a bit more about it, if there is a method, it would be write a sentence. If they like it more, write a paragraph. If they like it more, write 3 paragraphs. If they really like it, then you're writing essentially an article of it. Yep. But with this means that for the first session, you just have to write a sentence for each thing, which means that you are right on the get-go. You have answers for all the questions without having to write a huge amount of story behind it.
Yeah, so an example of player feedback would be, you've made an ancient race. There's an ancient race. They're left in ruins in places. They did this, this, and this, and then they disappeared. Nobody knows why. If one of the characters said, yeah, my character has a background in archaeology, so I'm really curious to know more about that, write a paragraph. If the next time
give them
they
to a
come
book,
round,
first of all, of course. You deliver it, not, of
Yeah.
course, like here, you're the paragraph. You're like, you read a book about it, that's what the book was about.
Sure, so exposition from an in-world source. And then they want to know more, fine. Maybe you start building an encounter, which is relevant to that. They want to know more, maybe you hook into a campaign that way.
And finally, journals. I think that could be the easiest thing to say. Consider that writing journals for your characters will make them spend time for your game, if they have the time, writing for you and building the world around you. First of all, you might be, if you are lazy yourself, which some of us are, it will tell you all about what you need to know about the previous session, because they've written it for you. They wrote a report for you. But they also gave you to understand what they really like about your game, and what they really liked about the things they interacted with. And that's very important for them, because they are growing your world by doing their jobs, which is essentially, be the players. Again, for the last time, I think, in this talk.
Yeah.
You just play the game.
Again, you do your play, you listen to the session reports, you read what they've written, you have a think about it, you dream about what to design next, you have a think about it, you write a sentence, a paragraph, whatever you need for the next part, and then you play. You don't build everything at once, you don't exhaust yourself, and you always refer back to your scope and your meta and your themes so that you're building it in context. It's never a block on a stack, it's always something that grows from your theme and your scope and your big ideas. But it's small.
Very focused. As we were saying, actually we haven't said it before, but this is a process that we're growing still. We will be adding to the stock, and we will be putting it online. Johnny, we can actually decide where we can actually be going for the guys to get it. We will be doing videos on that, and we'll be growing each part separately. We'll be expanding because now we have 45 minutes, and I hope we haven't gone through those.
You should hurry up.
Oh, there is a clock there.
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm really sorry. Sorry. So if you have any questions, if you have any ideas, come to us, talk to us, and we'll be more than happy to actually reply and work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we have to be incredibly quick now because in 5 minutes something else starts in here. So, as we mentioned at the beginning of the talk, I saw some people come in. We are from World Anvil, which is a world building tool set online. So if you're interested in world building, you can come check us out. You can use the site for free. There are some premium memberships that can do certain stuff, but the premium memberships are for all the fancy stuff. Like the basic site works for world builders, works for DMs. You can just use it, it's cool. We've got a community of over 90,000 users who really like it, so that's nice. And we're also, do you want to pull a name out?
You talk about the Finnish bananas?
No.
Talk about the Finnish bananas, that will choose.
So, we are giving away a year-long membership for somebody as a thank you for coming to listen. Thank you all for coming to listen. And as an extra thank you, if you are interested in the site and you go there and you like it within the next 24 hours, I think we said, if you give us the code Finnish Bananas
On a message.
in a message
Patreon.
via our Patreon, instead of upgrading, we will upgrade you 1 tier extra. Just as a thank you for coming and listening to us. It was very, very kind of you to be here. You've all been great sports, and you've all been replying to our questions, which is very nice. I was a bit worried that you'd just sit there and look at us. But you haven't. You've been lovely, so thank you.
Thank you.
Is this the name?
Yes.
All right, I have to read it. It might have a Dutch accent, so I'm sorry. I can't unwrap it. Mika Laurila.
Congratulations.
Congratulations! We'll need your email address so we can give you a membership. Yes, big clap for this man! Big clap for this man! Congratulations, you won a thing. For everybody else, if you would like to be upgraded via the Patreon, please send us the Finnish Bananas message. You can ask us more about that at the end. I think we have 3 minutes left. Do we have time for a question? Or not even?
Outside.
No. Okay.
Johnny says
if
outside.
anybody would like to ask us any questions, we will be in the hallway, out there, because we need to clear this room for the next people.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for listening to us. I found it.